Hi, I'm Andrew Spieler.
And I'm Mary Hope Rennie.
And you're watching or listening to Behind the Sign, Real Stories from Real Estate.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Sign with Andrew Spieler and myself. And today we have a guest, and I'm excited. We've kind of had just the two of us for a little while, so I'm excited to have a guest. Do you want to introduce our guest
Absolutely.
today?
We have Jay from Anchorage Appraisal Group joining us today. How you doing, Jay?
Hi, Andrew.
How are you?
Good.
It's a long time no see, right? You were in here for the first time yesterday, and then I roped you into coming on the show today, right?
Yes, you did.
Yep.
Oh, that's how we do it here.
That's right.
We don't give you an option.
Yep. Yeah, we just act before we think when it comes to the podcast. So it's good. I'm glad that you're here. And, you know, appraisal is something that I know very little about.
Mm-hmm.
I know its importance, and I understand the interesting sort of dynamic and relationship that real estate agents have with appraisers and vice versa. And I would love to dive into what that is, right? Where's there the overlap? Where's there the difference? What are the two different expectations of the positions? And how did you get into it?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Let's start at the beginning.
You know? Okay.
What happened?
Yeah, how did I get here? That's a good question. I ask myself that.
I thought so.
First off, thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to be here. The question was, how did I get here? I grew up in a family. My dad was into real estate and developing, and I actually started as a school teacher. And for a summer job, appraisal lent itself to a lot of flexibility, so I could take on a couple assignments, still keep my regular job. I love construction and homes and remodeling, and it was the flexibility of the job. And when I first started, I didn't want to put in the time in the heavy sales organization that sales takes in the nights and the weekends, so I could stay in a profession that I liked and be flexible. And it just kept growing, and then I went full-time and started my own business, and here I am today.
So how long ago was that? What do you say?
Oh.
Sorry. What do you think?
I started this in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So over 20 years.
Yeah, just getting warmed up.
Yeah, that's good. I started in the 2000s too, so we're a little seasoned.
Little seasoned.
There we go. Good. So what maybe has kept you in the business? Because we've had, I'm guessing if early 2000s, you hit also the crash of 07, 08.
Yeah, that's when things changed, and I would say, to be honest with you and your viewers, I as appraisers, I don't think the business changed for the best for us and for those that don't understand it. We're now governed the government in trying to protect the consumer from the crash. There's these third-party companies that assign appraisals. They're called AMCs, Appraisal Management Companies. So we're at the mercy of their assignments, when in the past we did traditional business practices. We're having clients and client entertainment, and it was very relationship-driven. And I felt the clients respected our opinion and our professionalism. So now we work for these AMCs, and they don't always respect what we do. They're more representing their side of it. But anyhow, that's where we are now, and that's the system that we work in. But your question was what kept me in it?
Yeah.
I enjoy the flexibility. I do enjoy homes and construction and problem solving, and the flexibility of being self-employed. And typically, appraiser is not affected by the ups and downs of the market like you in sales are. Right. Because a lot of our work has been in the past home equity lines, HELOCs, equity loans, refinances, and that work is not going on right now, much of it due to the high rates. Yeah. So the answer to that is the steadiness of it all.
That's a very interesting perspective of it, because you are so closely tied with our industry, and that's kind of the whole point of this podcast, is to really peel back all the layers of real estate, because so many people see HGTV.
Right.
End of story. And first of all, for those who are kind of observing real estate, not from a real estate agent's perspective, there's a lot that goes behind the scene of what happens in a real estate transaction, and also the relationships that you have to develop in this business. Even though, as we were saying, there's a lot less of that now that all those restrictions have come in. I feel like I came in right at the crash. I decided this was a really good time. But at that time, I did have a relationship with appraisers. Mm-hmm. You saw the same ones. Mm-hmm. Now it's pulling it out of the hat. Probably the same thing with you. You're seeing only you're never seeing the same agent again. Is that, or do you see it more consistent?
I would say what you're saying. I think these regulations have lowered the quality because what happened is the appraisal management companies started. Be careful what I say here.
I love
this is
it.
editable.
Yeah. They started representing their interests instead of the interests of the homeowner, the client, the realtor, the bank. So what you're saying with they're not seeing the same appraisers, you're not. The AMCs now may be shopping for the lowest price appraiser because they make their money off of the difference of what the bank pays the appraiser, and then the AMC now pays the appraiser, so they get the spread.
Interesting.
So if appraiser can be lower price, and I'm sure you've noticed that the quality has dropped, and you hear that around the industry, that they are now selecting. So they being the AMC select the appraiser. So it's not based on quality. It's not based on reputation. A lot of it's based on price and speed now. From what I guess we're going with modern business. We're picked by a nameless, faceless website is the way we determine who gets the assignment.
That's very interesting, and it's so different than what a real estate transaction as a whole is, right? Like everything is relationships.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden we're putting these restrictions. It's very different. Yeah.
So just because I'm a novice at this, taking a step back, what is an appraiser? And at what point is an appraiser engaged in the process of selling a home, if at all?
The appraiser is supposed to be an independent, unbiased stakeholder in the real estate transaction. Picture, if we have any sports fans out there, we're the referee. Mm-hmm. We're the referee of the real estate transaction. In the perfect world, the appraiser is hired not to represent the bank, the homeowner, or the realtor that all have a vested interest in a financial outcome of the sale. The appraiser represents the public good, is what they call it in our code of ethics at USPEC. So we're representing the public good to make an independent value determination of the property. I'll give you Appraisal 101. It stems from the business did not even exist until the late 1980s, when the first savings and loan crisis happened, when the banks would make their own appraisals, and then they determined it was a lot of fraud. People were giving loans to their friends and unsatisfactory loans, and it crashed it. So the federal government said, we need some more checks and balance in the home lending process, and then the appraisal profession started. So long story short, we're the unbiased third party referee. Keep it clean out there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because would you say that probably there's a lot of different opinions of what an appraiser is in the real estate world?
I'm glad you invited me and you're here as an agent, because there is a big disconnect between the agents and the appraisers. We both succeed when real estate transactions happen, but we have a different job to do, I would say. And I try to respect the agents.
Yep.
Your job is to represent your client, get the highest price, and you're in sales. So you use a lot of emotions, you use the future.
I don't know what you're talking
right?
about.
Or not you, but
Yeah,
salespeople do.
the future.
You project the future like you're supposed to. as a good
Yeah.
representative of your client, appraiser has to deal with the past.
Yeah.
We're making our values based on data, based on past sales. So,
Yeah.
and we're supposed to remove emotion. So often, matter of fact, we don't even call it a home in our report. If you notice, it's a property. We're trying to remove any emotion and just speak factually. And often there's a disconnect, but at the same time, I think everybody benefits
Yeah.
when transactions are finished, and they're finished in a fashion that it's a fair loan, and everybody succeeds, including the buyer and seller.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So, as you know, and I know from the last 5 so years, the appraisals and the sales have been wonky because of all the high. We were kind of talking about that with multiple bids and all of it, like out of control prices. Yet it was the way that buyers were able to get a home because there were so many buyers and lack of inventory, right? And so appraisals came actually into the equation even more so because us as agents listed a home where we felt like it was and we knew it would sell well over that. The data didn't show that, but the buyers told us that's what it was worth to them, which is, I was actually doing a market analysis class with my agents a couple weeks ago, and they said, what is the value of a home? I said, well, it's what a buyer's willing to pay for it and what a seller is willing to.
I agree.
That's what, in a real estate transaction, that's what it is. And yet, that doesn't mean the data supports that always. And I feel like previous to this, it really was a collaboration because if there's communication between an appraiser and an agent and they're both helping the other out, it really can go smoothly. And they're not conflicting. We kind of now feel like you're on one side, I'm on the, I'm the listing agent, I'm defending my place, and you're trying to disprove me. And that's not what it is.
Yeah, especially if you're coming from a neutral standpoint, it's not about disapproving, it's about just accurately taking and measuring data points, because at the end of the day, and this is the irony, right? Because we talk about looking at the data in real estate so much, right? It's about go back, look at the numbers, numbers don't lie, right? And I'm assuming that you're looking at historical data of numbers and points of a property over a certain period of time to arrive at a conclusion. And it's just interesting that the data, which is the Spock, versus the Kirk, which is the emotional, right? Sometimes they align, and when they do, great. But oftentimes they are there to be the ones to keep each other accountable, right? In a way.
That's perfectly said, and that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Right.
You got a job to do. We have a job to do. The system and the banking system and the financial system created the rules for two accountable people in the transaction to make it happen.
Yeah, well, it's almost like the government that checks and balances, right?
Right.
I mean, that's really, and that's, I almost, as you were saying that, Andrew, the fact that there's a little tension is okay.
Yeah, you need tension.
Sure.
You need the
They're coming from two different
unstoppable
perspectives.
force against the immovable object. I mean, that's the relationship that I think kind of defines life in and of itself. If we want to get really theoretical with it.
Yeah, but I think the issue comes when agents feel defensive of this person's out to get me, which is not what it is.
Not at all. I'm gonna unpack a couple of things about your comments. Number one, there's tremendous liability on the appraiser, we feel, because the ultimate outcome, if something did go wrong, the appraisers always feel this tremendous liability. And earlier you said, I'm trying to value a home. And what is the value is, we'll get into that in a minute, but ultimately with the appraiser, we're being paid for an opinion of value. It's the banks that have accepted it as fact, right? We do our report. We say, I'm a paid appraiser.
This is observation.
Observation, and I sign it this opinion of value on my opinion. It's not fact. And the definition of value is slightly different. It's the most probable price a property would command, considering all things are equal on an open market sale. So,
wait, can you say that one more time?
That was
good. That was gold.
The most probable price. meaning that house may be selling. You caught a buyer, typically here in Southern,
Yeah.
coming up from Massachusetts, that had a pile of cash, and so they're paying way more. Yes, that was the value
At that moment.
of that, but in appraisal value, it's the most probable price.
Yes.
So the data showed that that is not the most probable price
Correct.
of that home. Although, was it the value? Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So that's why our job is slightly different.
Absolutely.
And like any profession, I think some people are better at their profession and some aren't. And there's different personalities of, more flexible people willing to listen and more rigid people. So,
But I think also that part of that is this dichotomy between appraisers and agents, and I kind of joke about it. But appraisers have been beaten up by agents.
Yes.
And agents have been beaten up by appraisers because of the nature of the business.
correct.
And so you're going to get appraisers who have blinders on, walk into the property, don't want anything to do with the agent because they're afraid that's going to affect their opinion of the value, or they don't believe that matters. And then you have agents that they think they know more than the appraiser. And there is going to be that kind of, I think sometimes we build up those walls because we feel like the other is against us, as opposed to, hey, I remember when I was a new agent 16 years ago, I loved going to the appraisal because I could ask somebody who has an objective opinion, what is this? What do you think? What would this, I also learned very quickly by asking an appraiser questions. They also helped me out too
Right.
because they knew I wasn't out to get them.
Right.
I actually wanted to help, and there's ways to do this, and not everybody knows how to do that.
I think it's a success in any profession is the communication and teamwork and working together. What happens is the agent will be hard set on their opinion and the appraiser is hard set. And then when we speak, for instance, I've done many a time when I always try to communicate and I try to listen, and
It's try is where
it's try, and I call somebody and said, I'm not seeing that value according to my data. And if you give the agent a chance, I've heard this often said, I agree with you, but the homeowner wouldn't let me go for that price. So it's,
and someone was willing to buy it.
We are on the same page, but it's a difficult job. Mm-hmm. It's a sensitive job, and we're all trying to do the best we can. And those disconnects do come from, I believe, not understanding one another.
So going to understanding, when you're going to a property, when you've been assigned and you've accepted an order, and you've called the listing agent, you've set that appointment up, what are you seeing and what are you going there? What's your mission there?
I would say fact gathering at first, checking, and what they say is we're not doing an inspection. The appraiser.
Oh, you know how many times I've had to explain the difference of that?
It's a casual observation. The form is filled with legal caveats that we're not an inspector. It's a casual observation. So we're looking for condition, quality, square footage, size, neighborhood, and any physical features, maybe, and also conditions of the community that affect the value. And we do have a presentation that we've been trying to work on and breaking down that disconnect with the realtors. So we call it Appraisal 101, and we've been going to some different real estate groups and trying to put in that presentation. We call it a common appraiser disconnects between the realtor and the appraiser. So what you said, here's some of the disconnects that we see that are causing us to not be on the same page is realtors not understanding the rules that we have to go by. We have a code of ethics called USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's a set of rules that we have to go by. So things like the common disconnects are maybe finished basements, counting in the GLA, and then the realtor will say, well, that doesn't have.
They live in the basement.
well,
They have 5 kids living in their basement, so of course it's living space.
And it is living space,
Yeah,
and
it's
it
not-
does contribute to value, but it's
Yes.
not what they call GLA, gross
Yes.
living area. It's below grade finished area. That's a disconnect. Bedroom counts, excuse me. It goes by the septic system, so there may be an extra bedroom there or a den or
I mean,
a room.
not just a closet,
You can't just put a bed in and say now it's a 5-bedroom
or just put one of those armoires in
Yes,
as a
yes,
closet. 'Cause
right.
that's what everybody. HGTV tells you if you put an armoire, then it's a bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do renovation homes, and I've never finished one in a half hour yet. But that goes by the septic system. Just different things, garage bays. It goes by what car can be moved sideways, in and out, not in a row. Different items of condition and quality, but those are the main ones. I would say mainly the bedroom count and the finished basement.
What about also the 3rd floor or ceiling?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the new restrictions of
Yeah,
how much living space
it's
if I can fit in it. or
right.
not.
Yeah, it's supposed to be it starts at 5 feet, and
So if I can walk underneath it, because I'm not 5 foot.
it's supposed to. You're allowed to have so much of 5 feet.
You're
and
not
it goes
5
up
feet?
to.
No, I'm not.
What?
4'11".
4'11".
So anyway, yes.
Wow,
So
fun fact.
I'm the measuring. So if
You're
you
the
ever need
measuring-
me, I'm
Oh,
there for you.
good. Yeah.
If I can walk
Yeah.
underneath it.
But I'd say the realtor call and ask a
Yes.
question, and we know you're under pressure from the seller, the homeowner,
And the buyer now, because they're now responsible for the gap. And a lot of times
Right.
those buyers, that's actually more stressful.
Right.
Because it used to be able to negotiate if the value came down.
You're absolutely right.
Now they're covering appraisal gaps of $50,000 to $80,000
Correct.
or more,
And
or no, unlimited.
Yeah, we used to see people would renegotiate and say, "Oh, we misfired on this one. But that's not happening anymore." And I think the consumer is part of it too, because you're accepting a loan
Right.
on this home. In essence, it's the bank's money. And when you sign that paperwork to say we're going to accept a loan and all the stack of paperwork this thick that you've agreed to, you're agreeing to their conditions. And they have hired the appraiser to value the collateral of their investment. And sometimes the sellers don't like that and the buyers don't like
Both.
that.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is, of accepting the rules of the banking when you use somebody else's money. And that's where the whole profession was started,
The banks.
to protect the investments for the public good of the entire economy and real estate market.
Yeah, that was a different perspective I haven't heard. I've always heard protecting the banks because that's their money, which is part of it, and you mentioned it. But the greater good of the whole economy is a very fascinating added layer to this, that checks and balances and I do feel that having appraisals, even if people were putting large appraisal gaps in there, there was this checks and balance, because if we didn't, I can't imagine where the market could have gone when people were paying $100,000 over. As a norm, $50,000 to $75,000 on a $300,000 home. That's a 25% increase or something like that, because I'm not a financial numbers person. You can't make that up. Well, you
Right.
couldn't. Between 21 and 22, you could have made that up because the values went up that much. But
Most mortgages get sold off to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which is a pseudo-government agency. So there's a lot of federal rules
Yeah.
and regulations when we do an appraisal versus a salesperson that is on
Yeah.
emotion and forecasting the future. So we have a lot of rules that we need to go by. And there's tremendous liability because, especially with government-backed loans, they underwrite them. And, they're stringent about what they want to see. So a lot of times for the realtor or the homeowner to get mad at the appraiser, we were following, the guidelines that were set forth.
I was going to say, because I relate everything back to working on film sets, what you do is kind of what I had to do on film sets. As a first AD, I had to be the one who would sort of be making judgment calls on sort of like where does creative end and production begin, right? Where does the budget allow and where does the creative try to push? And they're always against each other, right? And that's how you have to somehow like make them work in order to get something at the end of the day. And as a first AD, who, I'm in charge of time and making decisions of how to use the time, a lot of people be like, well, whose side are you on? Are you production or are you creative? And I'd be like, I'm neither, right?
Yeah.
I can't be either. I have to be adaptable to both sides, because at the end of the day, my sole responsibility really, which is kind of like what you are, is an arbiter of truth to the soul of the project, right? So at the end of the day, my whole mission is protect the crew, but also make sure that the story that was set out to be told is actually executed in a way that was a good outcome, right, for both sides. And it sounds like the same thing kind of here, right? You're going in and you're saying, okay, there's all this responsibility on this side. There's all this emotion on this side, right? And at the end of the day, you need to have somebody who's going in and sort of taking and weighing both and hearing both, but making a sort of uniform and guided decision that is replicable on a case-by-case basis, right? So all the variables that may exist with the crazy emotional side of things over here, those are always going to be there. It's always going to be a different set of circumstances, but your approach to the evaluation of the home has to remain very consistent and sort of clearly defined, right?
That's correct. That is exactly right. And one thing to go back to the value, the definition of value versus market value in considering those options. So you spoke of COVID and what's been going on in the market. I often tell realtors, I agree with you. If somebody wants to pay $1 million for that house, that is the value. We're not there to determine the value. We're there to do market value, which the definition is the most probable price a typically motivated buyer and seller would buy. If you have somebody fleeing New York City for COVID and sold their flat for $2 million and wants to come to New Hampshire and loves that house on the lake or in a quiet neighborhood and said, I don't care if they're asking $500,000, we're going to give $650,000. We want the house. Well, that is the value, but it's not the market value.
Yes.
Because that's not a typical buyer or seller. And we've seen a lot of that, and I see a lot, say, with a young family that's been looking a long time for a home, and then we're a week or two out of this, and they're going to pay $50,000 more to get in that school system. Yeah. Well, that's not a typically motivated buyer. So we have to determine that. And what your comment made me think that we're supposed to, be measuring the market value, which is the typically motivated buyer. So there's always exceptions, and it's a tap dance like you do in film, and we try to do the absolute best we can, considering human emotions and unpredictabilities. But at the end of the day, it is an opinion, and it's not. It's right on the report. It says my opinion of value, not my fact of value.
Can I ask also just a short question? Because there is what appraisal is and the big history of it. Yet I'd love to get your take right now. We are seeing a shift in the market. We're seeing a little bit of a shift. Are you seeing that in appraisal situations where you have, a lot over the asking price and having to find and justify prices, or are you seeing them kind of becoming more normalized?
I am seeing that. Matter of fact, I can only speak to the little bit that I did last week. I did 3 assignments, which is slow for us. 2 of them were at ask, and 1 was below asking price. We haven't seen that in a long time. Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing Home City on the market. We've seen ones fly off the market, and that's why we can't tell why.
I agree with that.
We're in this shift, and I was just reading the book Shift this morning, and they were saying, as a national whole, we see the shift usually slow and progressive, yet locally we see a quick change. And I feel that in the last few weeks, we've seen this halt of certain things, and I just didn't know if you've seen it in a different way or your perspective on that.
I have seen some changes where maybe it's normalizing versus
crazy.
A year or two.
Chaos.
Every was way above asking price, and I am seeing a bit of a shift,
which I think is actually amazing.
I think it's
and
needed.
Yeah. Absolutely needed.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, I do not think the realtors are chaos.
That was Andrew's word, not yours.
They're doing their job.
That's right.
And most of us are very chaotic.
Exactly.
I will take that name all day long.
Yeah, and maybe we are curmudgeonly.
You are.
Yeah.
I'll give you that too.
As long as everybody owns up to what they are, it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed this.
I would love to have you come back on and see what you're seeing in the industry. Come back at some point. Would you be open to that?
And I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Good.
I enjoyed this. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It was fun. And
we need to bring you in for a class too.
Yeah, we're mending fences here.
Yeah, that's right.
These are one
One
of those
post at a time.
international
That's right. Yeah.
relations.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jay, for coming. And thank you for watching episode 23. Stick around for episode 24 next week. We're almost at the 25 mark.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
almost there.
Like, share, follow, subscribe, and leave us comments about things you'd like to see. And make sure you are checking us out on Spotify as well. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
See you the next time. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Behind the Sign, Real Stories from Real Estate.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained a little insight into the world behind those for sale signs.
Today's episode was brought to you by Keller Williams Realty Metropolitan, proudly serving New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. A special thank you to our agents, leadership, and partners at KW Metro for their continued support.
And thanks to you, our amazing listeners and viewers. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Leave us a review or comment. We love hearing your feedback, and it helps more people discover the show.
And if you have a real estate story you'd like to share or a question you want answered on a future episode, reach out to us at metro.kw.com or find us on Instagram, handle @KWMetroNH.
Until next time, we'll see you
Behind the Sign.